The morning sun barely penetrated through the tall windows of the San Diego Municipal Court as people entered courtroom 304. It was 8:45 a.m. and the wooden benches were already filling up with nervous faces. The reputation of Judge Richard Blackwell made everyone anxious, especially on Monday mornings. At 62 years old, the Judge Blackwell behaved with the stern authority of someone who had spent 30 years on the bench. His silver hair was always perfectly styled, and his black robe was ironed without a single wrinkle. The court officers often whispered that he ironed it himself every morning. Everyone stood as the bailiff's voice echoed in the room exactly at 9. Judge Blackwell entered, his face already set in his usual frown. He didn't like Mondays, and everyone knew it. "You may sit," he said without looking up. His voice carried the weight of someone who expected immediate obedience. The shuffling of feet and the rustling of clothes filled the room as people sat down. Among those waiting was Elena Hernandez. She sat quietly in the middle row, dressed in simple blue jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and sneakers. Comfortable, her black hair was neatly tied up in a bun, and she wore no makeup or jewelry beside. Her people held their fines and documents, but Elena only had her phone and a small parking ticket in her hands. The morning passed like clockwork. Judge Blackwell handled case after case, his mood worsening with each person who approached. He didn't give anyone more than 2 minutes to explain themselves. His sentences severe, maximum fines for minor infractions, no mercy for late payments. "Case number 47, called the court clerk. Elena Hernandez, parking violation on Broadway Avenue." Elena stood up gracefully, her movements calm and controlled as she walked to the front of the room. An elderly woman sitting nearby whispered, "Poor girl, she picked a bad day to face old Blackwell." Judge Blackwell didn't even look up when Elena reached the podium. He was too busy writing something in his notebook, his reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose. "Miss Hernandez," he said, still not looking up. "You parked in a loading zone for 45 minutes on Thursday afternoon. Do you deny this charge?" "Your Honor, if I may explain the circumstances," Elena began, her voice clear and professional. "It's a simple question," interrupted Judge Blackwell. Finally, lifting her gaze, her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw him. "Do you deny having parked in a clearly marked loading zone, yes or no?" The room fell silent. Everyone could feel the tension building. Judge Blackwell's treatment of minorities was well known in San Diego, although no one had managed to successfully complain about it. "No, Your Honor, I do not deny it," Elena replied calmly. "However, there were mitigating circumstances that day." "There are no mitigating circumstances for breaking the law, Miss Hernandez," Judge Blackwell interrupted again, his voice carrying that special tone he reserved for certain defendants, condescending and harsh. Elena stood tall, her expression remaining neutral despite the judge's evident bias. She could feel everyone's eyes in the room on her, some with pity, others with understanding. The young court clerk, Megan Wilson, watched the scene with growing discomfort. She had been working in this courtroom for 6 months and had seen this pattern too many times. A $50 fine would become $502 for some defendants, while others would get off with a warning. "The fine for parking in a loading zone is typically $100, announced the judge. Blackwell was arranging some papers on his desk. However, given the time that had passed, he paused, looking at Elena's casual attire with evident disapproval, clear disdain for the business operations in the area. "I am setting the fine at $2,500. A collective gasp swept through the room. The sheriff, who had seen Judge Blackwell's harsh sentences before, raised his eyebrows at the excessive amount. Elena remained unfazed, perfectly still, her face showing no reaction to the outrageous fine. The only movement was her right hand, which calmly reached for her phone. Little did Judge Richard Blackwell know that this ordinary Monday morning was about to become the most memorable day of his 30-year career, and Elena Hernandez was about to teach him a lesson he would never forget. Elena Hernandez held her phone firmly as she opened her banking application. Judge Blackwell watched her with a mix of impatience and satisfaction, waiting for her to beg for more time to pay the unjust fine. "Your Honor," Elena spoke clearly, her voice resonating in the silent room. "Before paying this fine, I would like to understand why the amount is 25 times the standard penalty." Judge Blackwell's face hardened slightly. He was not accustomed to being questioned, especially not by defendants. "Miss Hernandez, the decisions of this court are not subject to debate. If you cannot pay the fine today, we can discuss a payment plan." The condescending smile on his face made several people in the room shift uncomfortably in their seats. Megan Wilson, the court secretary, began to write faster, ensuring she recorded every word of the exchange. "That won't be necessary, Your Honor," Elena replied calmly. "I'm simply trying to understand the legal basis for such a large increase. Is there something specific in my case that justifies this exceptional fine?" The judge's smile disappeared, and he leaned forward with his hands clasped on his desk. "Are you questioning my authority, Miss Hernandez?" "Not at all, Your Honor. I'm questioning the reasoning behind your decision." Elena's voice remained respectful but firm. "As a citizen, I have no right to understand why I am being fined $2,500 for a standard parking violation." Some murmurs spread through the room. Sheriff Ramirez watched the exchange with growing interest. In his 15 years working in this courtroom, he had never seen anyone challenge Judge Blackwell so calmly and professionally. "Young lady," Judge Blackwell's voice took on an even more condescending tone, "perhaps you don't understand how things work here. This is my courtroom, and I decide the appropriate penalties based on the circumstances." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "And what circumstances led to this decision, Your Honor? Is there something in my driving record that concerns you?" Judge Blackwell shuffled the papers in front of him, fully aware that Elena's record was clean. His face turned even redder as he realized she was cornering him. "Miss Hernandez, your attitude is not helping your case," he warned, trying to regain control of the situation. "I could increase the fine for contempt of court even further." The threat hung in the air, but Elena remained unfazed. Instead, she took out her reading glasses and put them on. "Your Honor, I have been nothing but respectful. I am simply exercising my right to understand the judicial process. Would you mind if I take notes?" She pulled out a small notebook from her back pocket, a simple action that somehow made Judge Blackwell feel more uncomfortable than any outburst of anger could have. "What exactly are you writing?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "I am just documenting today's proceedings, Your Honor. The time, date, the original infraction, and the specific reasons for increasing the fine." She looked up at him with genuine curiosity. "Would you like me to repeat what you have stated so far?" The room was now completely silent. Even the usual rustle of papers had stopped. Everyone watched as Judge Blackwell's face went from red to almost purple. "This is very irregular," he stammered, taking his gavel. "I will not allow you to disrupt my courtroom with these tricks." "I would apologize if asking for clarity seems disruptive, Your Honor," Elena replied, still writing in her notebook. "I am simply creating a record of this interaction. I am sure the court keeps similar records, correct?" She looked significantly at Megan Wilson, who continued to diligently write everything down. Judge Blackwell suddenly noticed Megan's rapid writing and shot her a severe look. The young secretary pretended not to notice, keeping her eyes fixed on her computer screen. "Enough!" Judge Blackwell banged his gavel. "Pay the fine or face additional sanctions. This is your final warning, Miss Hernandez." She closed her notebook slowly and put it back in her pocket. "Of course, Your Honor. I will pay the fine right now." She tapped a few buttons on her phone. "Would you like me to send the receipt to the court's email? Or should I have my office deliver a printed copy?" "Something like that," she said. Her office had made Judge Blackwell pause for the first time that morning. He felt a slight pang of uncertainty. Who exactly was this simply dressed woman who took such careful notes and spoke about her office? He was about to find out, and the answer would shake the foundations of his carefully controlled courtroom. As Elena completed the payment on her phone, Megan Wilson, the court clerk, was checking her own device during a brief break in the proceedings. Her eyes suddenly widened. She had been sure Elena Hernandez looked familiar, and now she knew why. "My God," Megan whispered to herself, quickly showing her phone to the bailiff beside her. Officer Ramirez's mouth opened slightly as he looked at the Forbes magazine article on Megan's screen. The headline read, "Elena Hernandez, the brilliant behind Hernandez Tech Solutions, how this self-made billionaire is changing the future." The sheriff quickly wrote a note and brought it to Judge Blackwell's bench. The judge, still looking at Elena with an air of superiority, barely glanced at the note at first. Then his eyes returned to her, and all the color drained from his face. "Miss Hernandez," he said, his voice suddenly much softer, "there seems to be a small misunderstanding." "Here." Elena looked up from her phone, having completed the payment. "No confusion at all, Your Honor. The $2,500 fine has already been paid in full." She smiled politely. "Would you like to see the confirmation?" By then, Megan's discovery was spreading through the room in whispers. People were pulling out their phones, searching for the name Elena Hernandez. The silent buzz of excitement grew as more people realized who was before them. Is she the founder of the AI company worth billions? I saw her on TV last week. Judge Blackwell's hands trembled slightly as he removed his reading glasses. The woman before him was not just any defendant. She was Elena Hernandez, founder and CEO of Hernandez Tech Solutions, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world. The company had recently made headlines for developing revolutionary artificial intelligence systems that were transforming healthcare. "Miss Hernandez," Judge Blackwell cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this matter in my office." Elena looked at the time on her phone. "I don't think that's necessary, Your Honor. The fine has been paid." She paused, looking directly at him. "Unless there's something else you would like to discuss? Perhaps the reasoning behind the increase in the fine?" The judge's forehead was now covered in small beads of sweat, the same woman he had been treating condescendingly moments before he was regularly meeting with world leaders and had more money than he could earn in 1,000 lifetimes. A young intern from the back of the room rushed forward holding a newspaper. "Ms. Hernandez, I apologize for interrupting. Would you mind signing this? Your article on improving access to technology in underserved communities was inspiring." Before Elena could respond, more people in the room began to speak. "My daughter received one of your STEM scholarships. The medical AI from your company saved my mother's life. I use your app every day." Judge Blackwell remained frozen in his chair, watching as his courtroom transformed into an impromptu fan meeting. Elena handled the attention with grace, smiling kindly but maintaining her professional demeanor. "Thank you all," she said softly. "We should respect the court procedures." She turned to Judge Blackwell. "Your Honor, since my case has concluded, may I be excused?" The judge could only nod. His previous arrogance completely evaporated, but Elena was not finished. "One more thing, Your Honor," she said, pulling out her notebook again. "I noticed some interesting patterns in today's proceedings. My legal team will review the court records of your previous sessions. We believe in equal justice for all, regardless of appearance or social status." The message was clear. Judge Blackwell's face paled as he realized the implications. Elena Hernandez had the resources and influence to examine every decision he had made from the bench. "Have a good day, Your Honor," said Elena, turning to leave. As she walked towards the door, she stopped by Megan's desk. "Miss Wilson, thank you for your diligent record-keeping today. Expect a call from my office. We may need copies of today's transcripts. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Elena Hernandez, dressed in her simple jeans and t-shirt, left. With the same quiet dignity she had shown. Throughout the entire proceeding behind her left a shocked judge, an impressed audience, and the beginning of what would become a major investigation into judicial bias in the San Diego judicial system. Judge Richard Blackwell's Monday was far from over, and his problems were just beginning. By noon that same day, Judge Richard Blackwell sat alone in his office, staring at his computer screen. The news of the morning's events had spread like wildfire on social media. A video clip someone had recorded in the courtroom was already going viral. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Local news stations wanted comments. The chief judge of the circuit court had left 3 messages even his wife had called after seeing the story on Facebook. A knock on his door made him jump forward. He said weakly, "Megan Wilson entered with a stack of papers. Sir, these just arrived from Ms. Hernandez's office. They are requesting records of all your cases. From the last 5 years," she placed the official-looking documents on his desk. "They are particularly interested in cases related to traffic violations and fine amounts." Judge Blackwell loosened his collar. The room suddenly felt very hot, all of them. He asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." And Megan hesitated. "Channel. I'm 5. News is outside the courthouse interviewing people from this morning's session." Outside the courthouse, Elena Hernandez was sitting in her Tesla, making phone calls. Her simple t-shirt and jeans hadn't changed, but somehow, now she looked different. To everyone passing by her, her true power wasn't in her clothes or appearance. He was in his actions. Carlos spoke with his lead attorney through the car's speaker system. "I want a complete investigation. Not just the records of Judge Blackwell, but of every judge in this circuit. Look for patterns in fines, sentences, and treatment based on race, appearance, or perceived social status." "We're already on it," replied Carlos. "We have a team of data analysts starting today. The preliminary numbers from the last 100 cases of Judge Blackwell already show disturbing patterns." Elena nodded. "Good. Also, contact the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Send them everything we find." At the end of the call, her phone vibrated with a message. It was from Judge Blackwell's office requesting a private meeting. Elena smiled slightly and wrote a response. "Any meeting must be recorded with our legal team present." Meanwhile, back in the courthouse, the other defendants of the morning were sharing their stories with reporters. The elderly woman who had whispered "poor girl" when Elena approached the podium was now enthusiastically describing the scene to a news team. "You should have seen her face," she told the reporter when she discovered who she was. "My God!" But the best part was how composed she remained, such dignity, such class. Judge Blackwell watched the coverage from his window, his hands trembling as he poured himself a glass of water. 30 years on the bench, and he had never faced anything like this. His secretary communicated over the intercom. "Sir, the chief judge wants to see you immediately." Walking down the courthouse hallway, Judge Blackwell noticed how people looked at him differently now. The same courthouse staff who used to step aside for him now watched him pass by with smiles. Barely hidden in the chief judge's office, the atmosphere was tense. Chief Judge Ana Rodriguez did not offer him a seat. "Richard," he said, using her first name for the first time in years, "do you have any idea what kind of storm you've created? Elena Hernandez is not just any billionaire. She is one of the most influential advocates for social justice in the tech world. The AI systems from her company are used by half of the civil rights organizations in the country." Judge Blackwell slumped in his chair. "I didn't know who she was," he murmured. "That's exactly the problem," Chief Judge Rodriguez snapped. "You shouldn't treat anyone differently based on whether they are rich or poor, famous or unknown. That is basic judicial ethics." As if things couldn't get worse, her secretary rushed in without knocking. Sir, the Hernandez Sinuratra team has just filed a formal complaint with the Judicial Investigation Board. They are asking for a complete review of your conduct on the bench. Judge Blackwell's world was crumbling around him. The very authority he had wielded so carelessly for years was now turning against him, and it all started because he couldn't see beyond his own prejudices. Outside, Elena Hernandez's Tesla was pulling away from the courthouse. She had achieved what she came to do, not only to pay an unjust fine, but to expose a system that needed changes. The real work was just beginning.